Testing 1, 2, 3. I wanna make sound. I wanna change everything. I wanna know it, feel it, take it all. I wanna fix everything. But the hardest part of this is to take who you are and change what you need. Stuck in a place you're not meant to be. Take all your doubts, take it from me. You made your chains, now be your release. I wanna scream out, 'cause I can't stand this wait and see. 'Cause I've been way down, way too long. There's still a pulse in me. But the hardest part of this is to take who you are and change what you need.
Hi, we're back. Hi, Larry. You know how you're supposed to get permission to disconnect a hardware device before you unplug it? I never got that permission, so I had to unplug it anyway.
Hello everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me. Let's see. Looks like we got 14 people watching the stream if I'm looking at the right counter. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 people in the hood. Oh, that's right. I forgot to turn my air conditioner off when I turned on the microphone. Be right back. That's why I had the air conditioner on, was to cool the place down enough for me to get through the next couple hours without it. Thinking of heat, I did get myself some... oh, Darlene's on. Hello, Darlene. Nice to see you. Anyway, I got myself my coffee this morning, and everyone's familiar with my iconic cup here, except that today I decided this wasn't enough. So, my current coffee cup for today is this one.
Oh my gosh. And you can still do the special effects and hold it closer to the camera. Your cup's gonna have its own show.
Actually, this one that I've got right here is older than the one I've been using. But I only just recently dug it back up. Spatial K, something that I'm perfectly willing to poke at fun at myself over is the fact that I'm on blood pressure medicine, and I wash it down with a mug of coffee like that. Let's see. In some of the news going today, those of you on Facebook will have seen that I got around to changing the logo for the Cavern Tour. And as part of that process, I decided that I didn't want to fake the name of the words Cavern Tour in Denis like I had been up to this point. And so I got in touch with Richard, and we finally decided on some actual words. So the Cavern Tour in Denis is now officially Paepherin Shotav. And so Galpa is the official word for cavern, as opposed to Galpo, which is a cave. Rinsho means to tour, and Tav makes it a noun. And that means that everyone here is a Rinsho Tan, or tourist. Another one is he and I had asked him whether or not he thought that back in Denis history would have been enough tour guides in order to have them form their own minor guild. And he actually liked that idea. Decided that it was going to be associated with the Guild of Cartographers as a cadet branch. And we had to come up with a word for a tour guide. Well, since Rinshotan means tourist, that couldn't be the word for a tour guide. So he actually invented a word on the spot, which was Feshken. Feshken means guide, and it's that word has only existed since last Friday.
Larry, you seem to be cutting in and out. Is that what you guys are hearing too? Oh, okay, sorry, I guess it's just me. Go ahead, Larry, I'm sorry.
And that means that a tour guide, then, would be a Rinshokan Tan. And then the idea of a tour guide, a guild of tour guides that we were tossing around, would be Tel Rinsho. Something I wouldn't have caught if Richard hadn't told me is that Tel Rinsho kind of sounds like tell and show, which he thought was quite appropriate for a guild of tour guides. We didn't get quite that far in the conversation. Shiloh, not just any puns, he and I came up between us with a number of Denis light bulb jokes.
It's time to start the tour.
Uh,
Airfuck, are you going to be logging in Mirrobot?
Darkwing 32319.
Oh, excuse me. I'm feeling under the weather today. I'm a little off. Plus, my coffee hasn't kicked in.
Okay. Anything to say before we begin?
Alrighty, welcome everyone to our Cavern Tour. This will be our 20th tour of the season. Oh my goodness. We started this back in January 2020. And, no, I don't have the Rona. We're going to be traveling quite a bit today, so yes, it is important that you buddy Mirrobot. He will be providing our transportation services from place to place. He'll also be providing special effects. So thank you very much, Mirfac, for that. I noticed we have some new faces today, some returning faces. Pink Elephant, welcome back. I also noticed there's a new tourist named Keda here, Keda. And also Aurora 96 Co. So I welcome you. And Larry, do you have anything to add before we get started? And we do need to get, I guess, Mirrobot logged in.
Yeah.
Oh, and also, real quick, whenever you link to Mirrobot for the first time, you're going to be PMing him the word link or the word meet. But once again, we do need to wait for Mirfac to log in Mirrobot.
Okay. Now, let's see. Oh, excuse me. I do not believe I have anything I need to say right off the bat, so we'll just start getting into this. Oh, there is one thing I was going to do, and that is, let's see, the stream background today is a picture of the worm, which was the Denis digging machine that Anna discovered when she first broke into the cavern. And we won't be going anywhere for a couple of minutes because I'll want you to pay attention to the stream window. And that's because I'm going to be starting out with a different game. First thing, let's get this picture up. Today's tour is going to cover the museum pod age. The museum pod age is a single planet with multiple linking book locations, a practice which is unusual although not unheard of, because, for instance, Denis itself has many linking book locations. Each book links to an observation pod located in an area that Denis thought was notable. A map with the locations of the pods can be found on a folding table in the museum. On that map, one of the observation pods is shown with the word Zik written next to it. Because of that, explorers have concluded that Zik must mean pod. To name the age, the phrase the pod age was translated into Denis, and that gives the age the semi-official name of Rziksev. The real Denis names of either the planet or the age are unknown. The planet of Rziksev has a rotational period of roughly 15 hours and 43 minutes plus 4 seconds. So the days and nights are about 7 hours and 53.5 minutes long. However, that cycle is more easily expressed in Denis. By their way of timekeeping, a planet rotation takes 13 partavoti. There is a distinct possibility that Rziksev can be seen from space. The astronomy age Todelmer is an inhabitable moon that orbits a ringed planet. The planet has a pod, which is similar to the ones in Rziksev, orbiting inside one of its rings. Since observation pods of that design have never been found anywhere else, it could be a sign that the planet Todelmer orbits is the one that holds Rziksev. However, that theory is doubtful because planetary rings cannot be seen in the sky of Rziksev. The rings appear to be aligned with the equator, as is normally the case with ringed planets, and should be visible in the southern sky from any of the pods except Tetsunote, and they are not. And let me bring up and speaking of which, if you're looking at the stream window, you are now seeing the inside of the pod that's orbiting the planet. Through the window that you can see is the moon that holds the age of Todelmer. In fact, let's walk right over there and look at it. And then, if we go around to this side, the big planet that we see out the window is the one that the theory would suggest holds the pod age. However, again, that's unproven and there's reasons to doubt it, other than the fact that we are in this pod which looks so much like the ones that are found in the pod age. Like the pod age, this has 3 different levels. There are 2 ladders coming up here to the top level. When you go down, you wind up on a mid-level which has a platform that is exactly the same as the pods in the pod age. And there is a single ladder going down to the bottom level, just as in the pod age. However, this pod does have a lot more windows and is larger in diameter than the ones in the pod age. There are also no sound or scent emitters as there are in the pod age. Okay. One other thing that I was going to mention, by the way, is that in a previous tour, when we were covering Jalak, I mentioned that the force field that surrounds the game platform there was made up of segments like that were hexagonal, like a honeycomb. And I mentioned that this pod is the only other place that you see that pattern. You should all be able to see this in the stream window, where you can see that pattern through the window. So it suggests that perhaps the pod is surrounded by the same kind of force field. Oops. Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's do it this way. Okay. And then... Okay. Okay. Do we have any questions about what I just mentioned?
Whereabouts in Tetsunote, is that where you want him to be, Larry?
That is correct. Okay, we're ready to go to the next tour location. So PM the word link to Mirabot. The pods that we link to are battery powered and have solar collectors to charge them. With only the internal lights and window defoggers running, the power can last for a long time. However, there are external spotlights and other devices which drain the power faster. The solar collector cannot charge the batteries while they're in use. If you leave the power on in a pod and you link out, the batteries will be drained when you return and nothing will work. You need to turn off the main power and give the collector time to recharge the batteries before they'll work again. According to the Negalon pamphlet, translated by Trisha Laws, the pods are equipped with sound and scent emitters that were intended to help attract animals for the visitor to see. Explorers who have tried them report that their results were poor, so the devices may have failed over the centuries since they were built. This pod is is called Tetsunote. Tetsunote is the fourth and the last pod to be released by the DRC and was placed in the museum on April 19th of 2007. On the museum map, it is pod number 6. It's located underwater off the eastern coast of the island continent called Chicho. Judging by the sounds from its recordings, it may have been an observatory of animals similar to whales or dolphins. Sometime in the past, the pod suffered a structural failure that allows a trickle of seawater into its interior. The bilge pumps are able to keep up with the incoming water for the most part, but they can't reduce the amount that's already in the pod. The defoggers and flood lamps for the windows are also broken, so turning on the power doesn't make anything outside visible anymore. The electrical system is being affected by the seawater covering the bottom of the pod, so the lights flicker and cut out frequently. The pod tends to groan and make other noises that leave no doubt that you are under a great deal of outside water pressure. For that reason, visiting this pod has always been something of a nerve-wracking experience for me. Since it's a deep-sea pod, it can be safely assumed that there is little, if any, light outside of it, and its flood lamps were probably the only source available. However, the pod interior has deep red lighting, which could mean that the animals outside were bioluminescent, and the visitor's eyes needed to be accustomed to darkness in order to see them properly. Red light does not affect night vision, and so is used to illuminate areas when retaining night vision is desirable. To give you an example, military flashlights have red lenses on them for just that reason. While we don't know about the names of most of the places and many of the words on the museum map have yet to be translated, we do know what Tetsunote means. There is a Mayan word, Zonote, which became cenote in Mexican Spanish. The Mayan word means well and was used for giant sinkholes found in Mexico that are up to 200 feet in diameter and can be as deep as 400 feet. Cenotes contain pristine water, and the Mayans drew drinking water from them, and also for cooking and washing. However, the Mayans also considered them as places of worship and would sometimes throw offerings to their gods into them. The Mayans believed that cenotes were openings into the underworld where the gods lived, and from which humans had emerged in the distant past. Dr. Richard A. Watson theorizes that the Mayan concept of humanity emerging from the ground and the gods still living down there, and also the Mayan word Tsonote, was introduced to the ancestors of the Mayans by the Dani who stayed on the surface after digging air shafts to the surface. Supplying the caverns with fresh air was a task undertaken immediately after the Dani arrived from Garternay. In Dani, Te means in, and Tsonote means abyss. So Tetsunote means in the abyss. Okay. Any questions about this pod before we move on to the next? Presumably, it was just wear and tear over time. We're probably sitting in an ocean current, and there's the fact that, as I mentioned, we're pretty deep down, so there's an awful lot of water pressure on the outside of this thing. So over the time that it hasn't that it's existed but not been maintained, the water pressure probably just broke through partially through one of the seals.
Do we know what sorts of creatures are outside? I believe one of the sounds that the pod makes is sort of like a whale call.
That's what I did mention that earlier, that the pod was may have been for observing not only deep sea life but also possibly whales and dolphins. As to whether or not the DRC ever had plans to reinstate this pod and get it working again is something we don't know. So whether or not we ever would have seen any of the life outside is an open question at this point. They had a great many plans for this age that never did come to fruition because of the cavern shutting down. And let's see, 12:20. Okay, so we better move on. We are going to the pod in Darano next. So if you could transfer the bot there, please, Murphy. Okay, the bot is in place, so everyone PM the word link to the bot.
Don't scream, Frobos. Everything will be okay.
Darano was the second pod to be released by the DRC to the public, and it was placed in the museum on March 15th of 2007. Darano is Riziksev's Arctic continent. It holds observation pod number 25, which you will see marked on both the ceiling and floor of the pod. This pod is half submerged in a freshwater lake in the southwest of the landmass. The Dani were exhibiting the fish found in the lake, but since half the pod is above the ice cap of the lake, it's probable that there were land animals there as well at the time the museum was active. The observation pod of Darano is typical of them all. It is a hollow sphere with a platform system inside that has 3 levels. The platforms, of course, are designed to align with the windows in the body of the pod. 2 at the lower level, 1 at mid-level, and 2 in the upper level. At the bottom of the pod, of course, are pedestals, one of which holds the master power switch. That turns on the batteries, which provide the interior lighting, window defogging, and the spotlights that would be on the outside for nighttime use. The 4 buttons on either side of the power switch control sound and scent emitters, which were designed to attract a specific type of animal. There are several fish and animals in the vicinity of the pod. Murphak, if you can, please take us outside underwater. The largest of the animals outside the pod is called the Darano camkenta. That name comes from its resemblance to the flying animal native to the age of Kalo. The Darano camkenta is a ray with a single compound eye that wraps around the entire front of its head. If it follows the pattern of rays on Earth, it may eat crustaceans or shellfish on the lake bed, or it might eat plankton. It's not possible to observe much of their behavior from the pod, so their diet is a mystery. This is a little farther down than I want it to go. Oh, I see. You were building a platform up there, and we fell through it. There we go. Okay. So here we can see various kinds of underwater life, including the 2 camkenta. There are 3 types of smaller fish that congregate around the pod. The fan-tailed icefish, the ruddy angelfish, and the striped rockfish. The giant branched and flat greenish structures are 2 different species of freshwater coral. Seeing coral growing in an Arctic environment is something that would have a zoologist on Earth rubbing his eyes in disbelief, because earthly corals are strictly warm water animals found in the seas. To date, I've never heard either official or fan names for either of the species of coral. The round objects that you see are called globe sponges. Sponges usually trap food that is swept through the cavities in their bodies by water currents. But in this lake, the currents are too slow to do the job efficiently. To make up for this, the globe sponge produces gases internally that are released up the central cavity, and the movement of the gas bubbles in turn draws waters from the base of the sponge up through the animal and brings food with it. The names, by the way, were all given to these animals, by the Denis Zoological Society, whose unfortunately their webpage is now defunct.
This is really a fantastic view. Good job, Murphak.
One of the more esoteric things about this age if you'll take a quick look at the stream window, surrounding the windows, there is a feature that was pointed out to me by an explorer who called herself Mary Sue. And that's the fact that the frost on the windows does not follow the typical six-pointed pattern of ice crystals on Earth. Instead of having 6 points, the frost here has 5. This can be seen on the middle and upper landing windows inside the pod. Because of that, her conclusion was that the liquid in the lake couldn't possibly be water. I don't agree with that because while frost does often form snowflake-like crystals, it can and does break that rule and form other shapes, or even no shapes at all. Why I can't explain why almost all of the frost crystals on the pod windows have a 5-pointed structure, it's not impossible for water-based frost to form that way, it's just very unlikely. Does Darano have a geographical or environmental reason why frost would be star-shaped? That's something I don't know, and wish I did, but there you have it. Okay. Murphak, please take us up to the surface. My game just crashed, so I will be right back.
I never realized these creatures were so large. They look smaller from inside.
They're actually a fairly typical size for rays here on Earth. They actually get much larger than that. But that's about roughly stingray size, I believe. Jamie Merchant asked in the chat, what is your background? That's I mentioned that earlier, but that is a digging machine called the Worm. It's the machine that Anna found when she was when she first discovered the Great Shaft.
Are we going to be looking at the pods map in the museum today?
I could show it to you, but everyone's familiar with that for the who's played the game.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really planning on it.
Yeah, it's interesting because they show where the pods are in relation to each other.
Well, yes. Actually, there is one version of that I should show you. Just as soon as I get back here. Oops. Hadn't intended on doing that. I'm playing that dance again.
Just type find CT if you have to.
Well, I want Murphak to take us outside on the surface, so no need to for me to go anywhere. He'll move us all. Okay. Now let's see. I want to bring up this.
Darlene is asking if you know the dimensions of the worm.
No, because we only ever see the front part of it. The cat. The reason why it was left where it was left is because it's trapped in rockfall. So most of the pod is actually, or the machine is buried under rock and it can't be extracted. Okay, let's see. Where? Oh, here it is. That's not the one I want. Here we go. Okay. If you take a look at the stream window right now, I just put up a version of the pod age map which that has been translated. Or I should say transliterated, because it isn't in English, it's in Dene, but it's in English letters. Roman letters. We don't know what most of the words mean. We can only make guesses. For instance, the only one we're relatively certain of is down near the bottom center of the map. There's a body of water that says Darano Vamot, and that is probably means Southern Ocean. I think Vamo is south. I'd have to look it up because my memory isn't the best. Anyway, let me put this away, and then my point of view is stuck. Okay, let me actually. Here we go. There we go. Now I've got the point of view. The only thing that's really notable out here are the tall tree-like plants. However, nobody's ever given them a name, and we don't know very much about them. Just that they're here and that they grow up through the ice. The exterior of this pod is one of the best preserved. So you can see that the pod was originally painted a metallic blue with what looked like orange or yellow and black stripes. Yeah. We presume that the trees feed off of substances under the water, but again, there's no real information on them, so that's only a guess. Okay. Our next stop,
Can I ask a quick question?
sure.
I hear birds and crickets in the background.
That's
I don't
going
know.
to be not. That's going to be because of Murphak would have brought in
Oh, Jalak.
Jalak in order to give us the platform to stand on.
Oh, that's right. They
Yeah.
did sound familiar.
Okay. He also made the water transparent so that we can see the fish and swimming down below us. Our next stop is going to be Paepherin. So, do we have any questions about anything I've covered up to this point? Okay, it looks like we did not have any questions. Oh, excuse me. The pod is not. It isn't modeled, but it would have been anchored. But underneath, it would not be floating because there's no way they would be able to keep it stable otherwise. Say. That's one of those things where you weren't. It was not ever actually intended for you to be able to get outside the pod. So the idea that it isn't actually on any sort of a stand or anchor is something that they just didn't model. Jamie asks, if the Denis were so tech savvy, how come they couldn't make a battery that could run while it's being charged? And that would probably be for the exact same reason why we can't. Say a battery that can be charged at the exact same time that it's actually running equipment is not something that actually exists in our society. The closest thing that we have is regenerative batteries, which in a car partially charge while the car is not using them and is slowing down. Laptop batteries definitely do not charge while they're running the computer. So, we are getting a ride on one of the Cam Kenta, I do believe. That's correct, Jamie. I fix computers for a living, so no. What the battery does on a laptop is that it serves as a battery backup in case you lose power from the AC adapter, or if you unplug the AC adapter, they run the computer by themselves. But they definitely do not charge while they are powering the computer. Anyway, in the interests of getting things moving along, I think it's time for us to go to Paepherin. So if you could set that up, please, Murphac. Actually, Jamie, they don't. If you were to unplug the battery from your laptop computer and turn it on just the AC adapter, it will work just fine. The battery is completely unnecessary while the computer is plugged in. And how I got to start talking shop when I'm supposed to be giving a tour. You can link to the bot now. Paepherin is the largest continent shown on the map on the DRC table in the museum, and it's the landmass that the map centers on. The continent is hot, arid, and windy, although the winds die down a little bit at night. It holds several pods, including the third pod to be released by the DRC, which was placed in the museum on April 5th of 2007. On the pod map, Paepherin is shown to hold 4 pods, numbers 1, 12, 13, and 19. The pod that we link to is number 13 and is located near the mid-southern coast. It's located on an exposed section of bedrock for stability, but is surrounded by fields of loose sand with occasional rocky outcrops. There are many small rocks outside the pod that glow at night. They seem to be phosphorescent and apparently gain energy from sunlight, then glow at night for a time. As the night wears on, they stop glowing. During the day, the stones are dull and look like any other rock. But when they glow, they show a crystalline nature, and there are many different colors to them. The glow seems to fade away by about the local version of midnight. Paepherin is mainly a desert, and much of the wildlife is invisible to the eye, and probably consists of insects, arthropods, lizards, and snakes that mainly burrow underground to keep out of the heat and constant wind-blown grit. The only animal that can be observed from the pod is the Paepherin erwin, which is also called the Sanskrit. It feeds on the insects and other small animals that burrow underneath the sand around the district. It does so by scooping up mouthfuls of the sand and then filtering its food out as it expels the sand grains through holes in its throat sac. If you've ever tried to chase one down, an erwin is fast. Even though it looks like it's just lumbering along slowly, those long legs can cover ground quickly. When I was filming one at one point, I had to run like crazy in order to keep up with it when it was just walking at a normal pace. You can all join me outside the pod by telling the bot find Larry. Let's see, where's the sun coming up?
Folks were joking about the dings in the glass. You think those are from rocks?
No, those were put there deliberately because they are a part of a puzzle. They are meant to go along with the patches of clay that you find on the floor of the main level of the pod. And they have a very specific function in solving the riddle of this age. Oops. I am not seeing the sun. Okay.
Well, Darano had a ding in the glass too.
The air of Paepherin has some peculiar properties, possibly because of all the sand and dust in it. The district around the pod seems to be surrounded by high mountains, but those mountains are actually a mirage. That can be seen at sunrise. When the sun starts coming up, it looks like it's actually visible right through the mountains. Let's see. I don't know if Murphak is cycling between day and night, but I don't know if he's actually showing the sun movement. Well, if nothing else, I can show you with still photos exactly what happens. Okay, if you look at the stream window, I have a photo up which shows the sun just coming over the horizon. And you'll see that there are low mountains in the foreground, but the high mountains in the distance are actually transparent, and you can see the sun right through them. A short time later, when the sun is a little higher, you can see that the effect is even more pronounced. The foreground, the hills in the foreground are definitely solid, but you can just see the bottom of the sun poking through, or visible through what look like tall mountains. And a little bit later on, when the sun's is just about all the way up, again, you will see that there's definitely a transparent look to those tall mountains. Before the sun actually begins rising, this is what the night sky looks like. And again, you'll see that there's definitely a hazy look to the mountains in the distance.
Now, for purposes of Moolah, each of these pods is its own age, but if you look at the map, it looks like they're all in the same age, which would mean they all share the same sun. Is that correct?
They are not separate ages. They are separate locations in the same age. That would be just like the various linking books that you have to the Denis Cavern. In other words, you've got something like 4 or 5 different linking places that you can link to just on Agra Island alone. So they're definitely not the different ages.
And so then, yes, they do all share the same sun.
That is correct. It's all one planet with a bunch of different linking book locations. It's always difficult to get the proper animations for the for the Sanskrit. They got, although it's worth it if you can. If you've ever been in the pod when it went by in the live game, the animation on this thing is spectacular. And it does show it feeding at one point. Not to mention the fact that the sound effect that goes along with it is even just for Even though you know it's a game, it's scary.
Well, I know in Murphax Negalon, you can actually ride the Irwin. There's a bot command to ride the Irwin. But I
Yeah.
don't think he has a bot command in this
No, he does.
zone.
You want a ride? You get a ride.
Oh, there he is. Thank you, Murphac.
Yeah. Creek Rider, you're probably going to have to restart your game then, so that you can reset that. Now that we've got it standing still here, whoops. One thing, oh, wait a minute. Here we got some movement. No, only for a second. But when you set when when the Sanskrit is standing still and we have enough light, take a look at the way it's built, and you'll notice
Looks like chicken legs.
on the underneath the body, you'll see that there are holes in the skin flap. So when it eats, the sand will dribbles out of those holes, leaving behind the actual food.
So it's kind of like a baleen on a whale.
Actually, we'll be talking about that because in this case, it's feeding through a filter made of skin. But the Irwin in Negalon does have baleen. And
It's 12:03 key time. Are we on schedule?
yep, actually, I was about to say it's just about time for us to move on to Negalon, our last stop, so that we have plenty of time to cover everything I want to cover. And still make it our to limit time. Two-hour time, excuse me.
What we're hearing, Caver, is in order for Murphac to have these special effects for us where he can stand outside, what he does is he overlays the age of Jalak over Paepherin, so that he can build a platform and create a fault surface for us to walk on. And so those are the birds from Jalak.
Jalak.
You say potato, I say potato.
Say. Just have to remember Ryan Miller's joke. He called it Jalak Dador because it sounded like did you lock the door?
Oh dear. Floating objects that look like birds.
Okay. Murphak, please move the bot to Negalon.
Yeah, it does look like there are birds up there. I don't know if they're from Paepherin or not.
Actually, no. This would probably, in order to get this walking surface, he probably brought in the desert from the cleft. And those would be the birds from the cleft. No, I take that back. This is not the cleft. Those actually look like the baro that you find flying, that you can have flying around the Arch of Kurith.
While we're waiting, it does look like the Sanskrit is somewhat illuminated over here.
Okay.
You want to type PM find CT to the bot if he's still in the H? I don't know if he's still here. I don't mean to take over the tour from you, Larry.
That's okay. I'm running over there myself.
And yeah, I do see some holes in his jaw.
Mm-hmm. I tend to think of them as of it as being female myself, but that's just my thing. This year when Rawa had his birthday, I sent him a card which showed a picture of this one and the one from Negalon saying, "For your birthday, I thought we might go out and pick up chicks, but then I remembered that these two are the only ones I ever have any luck with."
That's a perfect birthday card. Okay, it looks like the bot's in Negalon.
Okay.
So we can see the other chick.
Yep. Let's go ahead and move on to Negalon, everyone. Link to the bot. Negalon is either a small continent or a large island that's covered in forests and jungles, and is located southwest of Paepherin. It's the site of Museum Pod number 18. It was the first pod to be released by the DRC and was placed in the museum on March 1st, 2007. In Denis history, Negalon was also the first part of the age to be displayed in the museum, and may have been the base link in the Pod Age's descriptive book. No one knows for certain who wrote the Pod Age, but most believe it was Guildmaster Oren of the Guild of Writers, who is said to have written it as a gift for Lord Geral. Geral later contributed to the museum for public use in Denis year 8797. The linking books in the other pods are most likely to have been written as expansions of the age after it was found that Negalon was just the beginning of the weird and wonderful wildlife to be found on the planet. The island is home to one of the most diverse ecologies on the planet. The DRC has cataloged 7 or 8 major types of animals in the area around this pod. Sadly, most of the large creatures of the district were systematically destroyed, and the area is almost devoid of its normal fauna now. Douglas Sharper investigated the matter and learned that a group of freed Baro had apparently developed a taste for hunting and were brutally killing every animal they could find. This practice has since been halted, but the effect remains. The district will probably take many years or even decades to recover. There is a chart that can be found next to the Pod Age map on the folding table that shows several, but not all, of the animals listed by the DRC as living here. Explorer Tricia Lawson found and translated a document called the Negalon Introductory Pamphlet in November 30th of 2003. I'll be breaking down the information on the pamphlet and matching the names of the animals to the available illustrations in a little while. But to give you an overview of what the pamphlet said, welcome to Negalon, home of the infamous Tarpon Shal and Bezel Pumi. Negalon was one of the first features added to our museum in 8797 at the request of Lord Geral. At the time, maintainers and museum staff felt that Negalon had been researched enough to approve the age for a museum pod that would allow our visitors to experience the age for themselves. You will notice that all of our pods, including Negalon's, have a few special features. Fortunately, solar power enables our pods to function without outside power sources. However, though our pods will gain power throughout with minimal energy usage, heavy usage will also drain energy units fairly quickly. Be careful not to use up a pod's energy before nightfall, or you may miss out on some sights. Before you visit Negalon, we'd like to have a minute to get you acquainted with the creatures that live there. Please remember that while we have placed our pod in an optimum position, you are visiting a natural habitat, and we have no control over when or where you will see our friends in Negalon, or if you will see anything at all. Our pods do have sound and scent emitters that will attract Negalon's inhabitants, although again, these are real animals and there are no guarantees. Remember, too, that all reactions to what you do in Negalon are not always immediately evident. Good luck. And then it continues with Negalon creature notes. Rather than give away all the secrets of Negalon, we want you to find creatures on your own. The following notes are only meant to provide you with an introduction to the natural habitat of Negalon. Now, one of the things I'm going to, instead of just reading you that section of the pamphlet, I'm going to be reading it to you with notes and illustrations in a short time, which is something I haven't done in a tour before. For right now, I'm going to talk about some of the plants that you see outside. The most striking feature of Negalon are the stilt trees, giant trees that have exposed root structures rising high above the ground. The density of the plant life varies, but the stilt trees are a constant across the landscape in this area. And I'm going to show you real quick. Occasionally you will see giant leaves floating down from the canopy, and those are the leaves of stilt trees. Let me, I'm bringing up a photograph at the moment. Here we go. If you will look at the stream for a moment, I've put up one of the stilt tree leaves to show you what it looks like by itself. And before you note that it seems to bear a striking resemblance to a certain recreational plant here on Earth, I don't know if you can smoke them.
I wouldn't know, Larry.
Let's see, Shiloh Bryan, I have an in-universe question. Museums have a certain definition in our society. Generally, with natural history museums, they showcase what we have discovered about our world, etc. Since the Denis wrote this age, the idea of it being a museum provides more than a bit of cognitive dissonance. Is this a translation issue? Did the Denis have a concept for which museum was the closest concept in our language? Something that you probably are not realizing is that when the Denis wrote an age, they didn't know exactly what they were getting. Because when you write an age, what happens is that you are describing in general what it is that you would like to find. But after that, the link that gets established is to an actual existing world somewhere throughout time and space and dimensions. And therefore, because it existed before the link was formed, it's guaranteed that there will be things there that you did not specify when you were writing it. And so for that reason, when Negalon was written originally for Lord Gerald, they had no idea that it was going to have the kind of wildlife that it does. And therefore, that's why Gerald decided to donate it to the museum so that other people could experience it. Once you get outside, you will see that there are tall, thin plants that have red spots near the tips. The Denis Zoological Society called them snake plants. If you look around the pod, you will see that the high ground is covered with marsh moss. The scale-like patterns you see, of course, are the roots of the stilt trees. And let's see. Here we go. snake plants are over around on this side. And you will notice that there is solid ground and also marsh. The snake plants grow in the marsh, and so do various ferns. Charminius, these were called snake plants by the Denis Zoological Society, which is a fan organization. You'll also find in the area ferns, other ferns, grasses, and algae. There are smaller trees off in the far distance which have not yet been identified by anyone or given any fan names.
With regard to the snake plants, these red eyes on them, are they meant to impersonate animal eyes, or is it just a coincidence?
It's just a coincidence that they're spaced too unevenly to be meant to mimic eyes of any sort. As you look around, one of the things that you will see partially on the way up the trunk of some of the stilt trees are some peculiar plants that have four-lobed petals. The Denis Zoological Society, for lack of anything better, called them piranha flowers. However, that's not what they are. Thanks to the recent release of information by Cyan, which was called The Intangibles, I can now tell you much more about the animals in this age than we knew before. The creatures or the plants that I just mentioned are called Bezoulpumi, and they were one of the things mentioned in the Negalon information pamphlet when it first introduced the age. The Bezoulpumi is called a monkey-eating plant in illustrations, and it's one of the most easily observed creatures from the Negalon pod. The pamphlet said, "See if you can find what likes to eat pumi. We'll give you a hint. They eat very slowly and live high in the trees." Excuse me, I'm mispronouncing pummy. Bezoulpumi work very much like a Venus flytrap. When a pummy lands or climbs across one, it triggers the petals and spiked arms to spring closed very quickly, wrapping around the pummy and drawing it into the mouth in the center of the plant. From there, the pummy struggles to escape, cause it to fall into a digestive chamber. It takes the plant a long time to digest its prey, and it remains closed during that process. When it's finished, the petals reopen. That is another slow process as the spring tension in the petals and arms resets. If the trap is sprung but the pummy escapes being caught, the plant immediately begins the long process of reopening. Okay, I'm going to go over to the stream now, because I have a number of things to show you, and unfortunately they never quite made it into the game.
Shallow had a question about museums. Do you want to postpone that until you show us the
I mentioned
video?
that. I talked about that earlier. You missed it. He was asking why they were called museum, if they had a
Oh,
different concept of museum, and I did answer
oh,
that.
I'm sorry. I have brain hiccups from time to time
Okay.
while I'm
Anyway,
herding cats.
if you look at the stream window, I'm showing you an outline or silhouette from the museum pod, animal chart. This creature is called a Gotse. That has been translated by the DRC into either tiger bat or tiger skeeto. And it actually would look like... Let me see if I can find that. Here we go. Okay, here we go. The pamphlet said that Gotse are usually pretty easy to spot, especially when they are resting, so we'll let you see if you can find them without any hints. If you see one, notice its stripes. No two patterns are the same. Gotse appear to have home trees that they regard their own and hang upside down from the branches at night to sleep. During the day, they fly out from their tree to hunt, but always return to the same tree to rest. The next animal mentioned is the Gipoli. And let's see if we can find one. Gipoli. Okay. Okay, this is a Gipoli. The DRC called it a jellyfly. Gipoli are another of Negalon's smaller creatures, although they are a much more colorful variety than the Gipoli Gipoli can be seen gliding through the air and are a favorite treat for Ripa. Gipoli are called jellyflies because of their resemblance to jellyfish, and are lightweight animals who float in the air like a jellyfish floats in the sea. This is most likely because they have a bladder of buoyant gas inside their bodies. Movement appears to be by means of a muscular flap around their body, which they move in a rippling pattern to move the air around them. Gipoli are active in both night and daytime, and are said to glow colorfully in the dark. And speaking of curry, let's go ahead and take a look at... there are two main varieties of curry. The curry are the fireflies that you find in clouds around the pod. But if you were to see one up close and personal, let's see, curry. Here we go. The DRC called them krillfly, by the way. Okay, how'd I mess that up? Okay. And this is one of the two variety that you find based on the way the colors of the animals. Excuse me. I suspect that both types of curry actually will congregate together because there are two different colors of curry flying around. There they are. The other type looks like... Okay. Looks like this. In any case, the curry are represented just as colored swarms of lights in-game. The pamphlet said, "We will say that if you can't find curries, things aren't going well. The large swarms usually fill the air, especially in more open spaces. Curries are one of the sole providers of nutrients for the Irwins. If you see a swarm of curries, look out, an Irwin might be nearby." Curry are one of the base animals in the local food chain and are the staple food of Irwin. They fly in swarms that appear to average between 12 to 25 individuals. There are, of course, at least two different species of animals that fall under the name, and I've just shown you those two. But they all exhibit the same behaviors and all glow continuously like fireflies. Curry swarms have glows ranging from gold to green, suggesting that the two species may swarm together. Okay, and then the next animal we're going to cover is called a Nurim. Let's see. Nurim. Okay. The Nurim by the DR is called a color pillar by the DRC. The chart said, or the pamphlet said, Nurims are a slow-moving and beautiful native inhabitant of Negalon. During mating seasons, especially at night, you have a good chance of being witness to some beautiful displays by female Nurims. Nurims live their lives crawling up and down the trunks of the trees in Negalon searching for food. Their name is derived, the name color pillar is derived from their resemblance to caterpillars and their bright coloration. The animals are most active in the early morning and late evening. During mating season, Nurim females glow to attract mates, and it's said to be a gorgeous sight. Okay, we do not have an actual illustration of the next animal. We only have the the silhouette that is shown on the animal chart, which would be this one here. This animal is a Panadoi. The DRC translates that as big leg. The pamphlet said, if you get the chance to see a Panadoi, you'll know why it has the name it does. That's all we will tell you. A Panadoi is big. Very big. From an observation pod, all visitors were ever likely to see were the legs moving past, and maybe to hear one pecking on top of the pod. It was the fact that big legs were all one might expect to see that has inspired the Denis name. Like giraffes, Panadoi are vegetarians who use their long legs to feed on the leaves atop the trees. To give you an idea of just how large a Panadoi is, their legs are longer than an Irwin is tall.
And these Panadoi, they live inside Negalon?
Yes, but they're the rarest creature of all to see, even before the die-off.
Well, do we know, do they prey on the Irwins since they're bigger than the
No.
Irwins?
I just said they're vegetarians.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The reason why, the reason why they're so tall is because they feed on the younger leaves on the trees. And then next we have the pummie. And this is an animal that we're all familiar with because it is one of, along with the Irwin, it's the only other animal that ever appears. Let's see. Pummie.
If I recall correctly, this map on the drawing on the table in the museum,
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a drawing of a human next to all these to show the relative sizes.
That's
right?
correct. There's actually two different scales on there, and so there's two human figures to show the relative sizes. Okay. Oh, there we go. There's a pummie. Okay. The DRC called the pummie the two-tailed monkey. It's also the pamphlet said that pummies hunt in packs and often eat the babies of Negalon's other inhabitants. Pummies will prey on sick, small, or weak adults much larger than themselves. Pummies like to jump from tree to tree, so you'll have to be quick. Pummie are active both during the day and nighttime, and are opportunistic feeders who will eat almost anything they can catch. They've been known to work cooperatively to hunt and kill animals bigger than themselves, especially if those animals are sick or weakened by hunger. While they are mainly seen jumping from tree to tree, leaps that cover incredible distances, they are also known to range on the forest floor looking for food. And I believe that we can summon a pummie so that we can see one in color. Murphak, if you can call a monkey for us, please.
Yeah, you see now why I asked about the eyes on the snake plants?
Mm-hmm. But no, that's more coincidental. If you look at the drawing of the, that was the original concept behind them. And excuse me, I forgot. I'm blocking that out already. So let's go ahead and do this.
Ethan, watch your fingers.
There are actually several different animations for this particular animal, by the way. And when you're actually looking for them in live, they can appear on either side of the pod. The next animal that is mentioned is the Reaper. Let's see, here we go. Okay. And let's bring that on screen. This is what in the stream window, this is what a repo looks like on the animal chart. But they actually do have a drawing of it. Here we go. So that you can get a better idea of what it looks like. The Reaper is called a gorilla by the DRC, and it's comparable to human size, appearing to be approximately 6 to 7 feet tall. They only resemble gorillas in overall shape. As you can see in the sketch, the Reaper seems to be almost reptilian in some aspects of its form, and has a tail with a stinger like a scorpion. The pamphlet said, "Another of Negalon's inhabitants are fun-loving creatures that like to eat Nurum, Gepali, and other plants and animals. We'll tell you now that, however, they are timid creatures and we often find them far away from the pod. If you happen to see a Reaper, consider yourself lucky." Reaper are especially fond of the Gipoli, and when seen, were often seen while catching and eating them. Unlike earthly gorillas, Reaper are at home both on the ground and in the trees, and were as often as not spotted climbing up and down a tree on the rare occasions when they were seen. Reaper are nocturnal, so the sightings were almost always at night. The next animal, let's see, is called a tarpon shawl. And the DRC translated the name tarpon shawl as drop claw. The pamphlet said, "The tarpon shawl is Negalon's most famous creature, and if you get a chance to see one drop down on an unsuspecting animal below it, you'll know why. You'll have to look carefully on the high branches. They are sometimes hard to see, but they are worth the effort." Tarpon shawl attach themselves to the underside of high branches in the jungle canopy. They spin a thread like a spider, and when prey is directly below them, they let go of the branch and fall down the thread to their victim. If the attack is successful, they pull themselves back up to the branch by their thread while hauling the victim along with them. Tarpanshal mainly catch pummy, but when the opportunity arises, are known to even kill baby Reaper. Occasionally, though, the thread of a tarpanshal will break under stress and the animal then plummets to its death. It's said that the thudding sound of one hitting the ground at speed could be heard inside the observation pod. There are no illustrations available for the next animal I'm going to mention, which is the Uchapara. The Uchapara Uchapara means large worm, and the museum pamphlet says this: Uchaparas, often seen dangling under trees, are actually young tarpanshals. See if you can follow the tarpanshal life cycle. We'll give you a small hint. You'll need to pay close attention to Gatsé. An Uchapara is the larva of a tarpanshal. When they are young, they are usually seen wriggling around the roots of the trees. When one is old enough, it climbs up the tree before undergoing a metamorphosis. It's not currently known if it has a juvenile form or if it transforms directly into a tarpanshal. And finally, we have possibly the most famous inhabitant of the age. Okay. Which is the Irwin. The Irwin, of course, is the giant bird that you see in the animal chart. The pamphlet says, although Irwins are technically birds, they can't fly. However, with all the Curie around, they don't need to. Irwins are the only Negalon inhabitants that mate for life and are often seen in pairs. It is said that up to 7 Irwin may inhabit a territory in a loose flock. To conserve energy, they tend not to move very much unless they have a reason, such as hunting swarms of curry, which are their staple food. Negalon Irwin feed by snapping a swarm of curry out of the air and trapping them behind the feathery plates hanging from their upper jaws, very much the way a whale does with the baleen plates in its mouth. Excess air would be blown out through the plates before the animal swallowed the curry it trapped. And we should be able to summon the Irwin here. If you would be so kind. Or we can just go to it. Yes, Jamie, we can. But first off, let's get a quick look at it. As you can see, as you saw in the illustration, they do have baleen in their mouths, or what's described as feathery plates, for trapping food. And that's one of the behaviors that you can see if you happen to catch one moving normally in the game. Now, one of the other things that I have to share with you in the last minutes of the tour is that I spoke with Richard A. Watson, a little bit about behind the scenes stuff to having to do with the Pod Age. The Pod Age was one of his favorites, and he says that they had pretty big plans for it. First off, the Pod Age was intended to be open-ended, and Cyan had plans to release more pods as time passed. There's 25 pods on the map, and apparently they had actually intended to use all of them. However, those 25 pods were just the start. There was no limit set on how many would be developed as long as the game lasted. Richard still wonders how many there would be today if the game hadn't been discontinued. The pods were intended to be a long-term project for explorers, like the lake lighting project. Richard was in charge of both the lake lighting and the Pod Age, and wanted the explorers to have that many kinds of projects like that available, so that they could find one or more that they'd like to contribute to. He himself likes game mechanics that take time and effort to produce a payoff. Another example of the projects he likes are the calendar stones, which when introduced, took an entire year to complete. The calendar was a personal project that you could choose to do or to leave undone, and the lake lighting was a community project that you could either choose whether or not to participate in. The pods were intended to be another community project. The idea was that explorers could use the pod controls to gradually repair the food web and increase the activity of creatures near the pod. At first, you'd only be able to attract creatures at the lowest rung of the ladder, such as the curry, the uchapara, things like that. When the number of creatures at that level hit a certain density, the next creature up the ladder would be attracted to the area around the pod. When enough of them had appeared, it would attract a higher order of creature, and so on. So pressing one of the buttons in the pod might attract the local equivalent of mice. The other buttons wouldn't do anything because the creatures they were meant to call weren't anywhere near the pod. But as time passed and more of the mice creatures were attracted, there would eventually be enough to attract the equivalent of cats to the area. The cats could be interacted with using the second button, and more cats would come to the area. Eventually, there would be enough cats to attract the equivalent of predatory birds. The third bird would then interact with the birds, and that's how explorers would work their way up the ladder. And that was how all the pods were intended to work. The precise timing of the long-term projects hadn't been determined before the game was shut down. There were many variables that Cyan Worlds couldn't figure out ahead of time. How many subscribers would there be? How many of them would be interested in contributing to the project? Richard, who was involved in the creation of the Pod Age, thought that the first level of creatures for each pod would arrive quickly, and then progress would be slowed for each consecutive animal up the ladder. By his calculations, he thought it would take about 6.4 million years in game hours to see the highest level of creatures in a given pod. He was talking about playing time, of course. As an example of how that works, if 500 players spent around 15 minutes each contributing to one of the long-term projects in a single day of real life, that would equal a little over 5 days of playing time towards completing the project. And that concludes today's tour. Do we have any questions that I missed while I was talking?
No, I didn't see any.
Okay.
It's amazing what Richard's aspirations were.
Mhm.
That sounds really cool.
Oh, there is one thing that I can tell you. They did have, let's see. Oh yeah, here we go. The 4 buttons in the Negalon pod. Button number 1 was to release a scent to attract the krill flies to the pod area, or the curry. Button 2 released a scent that would attract jellyflies to the pod. Button 3 would make a sound that signaled color pillars to reproduce, and button 4 makes a sound to attract monkeys to the pod. So that's exactly, that's the one pod where we know what each one of those buttons was actually intended to do.
Cave Woman is noting that it prefers to stand on one foot. That's not the normal animation.
No.
The normal animation is that it is actually walking.
Oh yeah.
It's just Murphak is just moving it along its track.
Yep. Okay, and then let's see, what are the other events that are happening today?
Well, first of all, I want to remind everyone our tours are the second Saturday of each month. So our next tour will be Saturday, September 11th at 11 a.m. key time. As far as the other events, I'll bring up the Guild of Messengers key mail that I have in my key. Today is August 14th. Minnesota, and also if you have any special announcements to make, go ahead and make those. The usual regularly scheduled events, 1400 is Arte's Story Night. Well, he tells stories about the Dunny history. That's in Sano's Hood, Tsahno, Sano's Hood. He also has a repeat story that sometimes is on the same schedule, sometimes on a different schedule, at 23:30 tonight in Sano's Hood. As usual, there's also the karaoke party at 1600, and that's in the new Guild of Messengers pub. And that's all I see here.
Okay. And I hope you enjoyed that, because that was so much more information than we've ever had before about the pod age. So I was really looking forward to telling you all about it.
Yeah, and I will reiterate, Larry and Murphak put an incredible amount of time into these tours. You have no idea what goes on behind the scenes here. And they're really fun. Well, they're fun for me. I think they're fun for Larry and Murphak too, even though they're working very hard. And we're so glad to see such huge groups each month. After, 20 months of tours, it's great to see such a huge group of people. So thank you all for coming out.
Okay. And I believe it is 1 hour until story night. So if you want to hang out here and play around with in the area, you are more than welcome to.
Yeah, to get the bot commands from the Mirrobot, just PM the word help to him, and he will keymail you a series of commands to instruct him what to do for you. All right, bye-bye, everyone. See you next month.
Bye-bye, Susan. And I am going to go ahead and stop streaming at this point. So